from Abuja.
So what is going to be the future of Nigeria if you don't think of the political dimension and economic dimension of oil?
Too many imports in relation to exports can distort a nation's balance of trade and also alter the value of its currency.
Our review and survey shows clearly that what we have is not the issue of forex demand. Forex would always be demanded. It is not the demand side. It is rather the supply side.
Then you look at the standard of living. If I come here, the people that I'm paying 18,000, what do I expect from them? Nothing. In terms of productivity.
It is my great privilege and honor to welcome you all to our third quarterly Red in Africa lecture and panel discussions. To us, it's basically about how to raise the level of living. But in order to do that, you've got to be competitive. And of course, in the 21st century, you've got to be globally competitive. So we have set up this lecture series in order that we will talk about the things that we have to do as Nigerians, as Africans, to be globally competitive. It is extremely difficult nowadays to be successful if you cannot compete and win vis-a-vis the Americans, the Europeans, Japanese, Chinese, and all these other people. And so sometimes we wind up blaming government, condemning government about what it is that they are not doing. The central bank, for example, has been in the gauntlet where people criticize it for the high exchange rates. How come the naira is so weak against the dollar? That therefore it must mean that the central bank is not doing a good job. How come we are not exporting? It must mean the central bank is not doing a good job. But I want to say that we need to be able to understand the nature of policy and understand the constraints that institutions face, whether they be on the fiscal side or on the monetary side. On the monetary side, I think that the central bank is doing quite a good job, that they have done, in my estimation, what I did not expect that they would be able to do during this period where our exports declined from upwards of $80 billion a year to around $30 billion. In that kind of situation, and especially when we depend only on crude oil exports for our foreign exchange, I think that we have done a great job to be able to stabilize our currency the way we have stabilized it. And so today we will talk about these kinds of things as we look at issues concerning exporting, exchange rate, and economic growth. We will try to see what it is that we can do collectively as individuals to make Nigeria, to make Africa more globally competitive.
What do we export? How do we export? What are we doing to make exports better than what it used to be. Because the basic issue is the foreign exchange issues that we have, which has become a serious problem to us, cannot be solved except we have a better inflow of forex. Our review and survey shows clearly that what we have is not the issue of forex demand. Forex would always be demanded. It is not the demand side, it is rather the supply side. And anything we want to do to increase our forex flow into Nigeria must focus on the supply side rather than on the demand side. We're running a program that we call the Zero to Export program. That program is targeted essentially at the youths. And we want to take them off from the rudimentary to get them to export, form them into cooperative societies, and provide the funding in consultation and counterpart with a commercial bank for them to do the first export and testing. It's a program that runs essentially for 8 weeks, mostly on weekends, and it is completely free. We are also embarking on the Women in Export program, which is basically focused on women, because we realize there are quite some areas for which women have a specific niche to produce.
In the next few years, if care is not taken, the hall that we are seeing today will go off completely because it's already crowded out. Now, the issue is, within the context of political economy and what has been observed in Nigerian socio, political and economic trajectory, what have gone wrong in exchange rate? Why do we have exchange rate volatility? I tried as much as possible to premise this discussion on 5 germane issues.
When you look at the reasons why investors are not coming, you look at the people. You know, as Nigerians, how do we do business? Do we do honest business? How do we carry ourselves when we do business with other people and even with ourselves? You look at the places. You are coming to invest in Benin, for instance. You come through the airport, maybe Ikeja in Lagos, and for you to drive to Benin, you are almost at the tip of your seat before you get to Benin. I mean, you begin to wonder in your head as an investor, where am I going? What kind of a place is this? You look at the policies that the governments are putting in place. What are we, we were talking about TSA the other time. I said, look, if it were to be in the United States, they will look at the consequences of this on their economy, on their people, on the businesses, on the investors, on this. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but some ideas are good but needs to be carried out in phases that we will not even feel it as business owners, as investors, as manufacturers. Then you look at the platform. What are the platforms? How effective are our platforms to encourage investors to come? Rwanda, they knew they had a problem to resolve. They came together. They put their best heads together. They came out with policies that will encourage people. So then, the last of it, the pricing. If I bring my money to Nigeria, with this foreign exchange, several regimes of foreign exchange, with the GDP, with the CPI and all of that, I sit down, I do my calculation. If I invest $100,000, how much am I going to get back? The way we run business in Nigeria, cost of running business in Nigeria, whether anybody wants to believe it or not, is very high. We say that, oh, labor is cheap. How about the other aspect of it? So when you had all of this together, and I also want to mention something that is very important, the consequences of litigation. If I come from the UK to invest here, I have problem, whether with manufacturers, with vendors, or the people that I, render my services to. How am I sure that, the litigation can go on well, that the justice system will be fair, that is not going to be prolonged for 20 years, that I'm not going to abandon everything that I have here. So for me, solution is to start with the civil servants, whether we want to believe it or not. You see the EFCC, what was it that was brought out by the MBS and says that civil servants are the most corrupt, that they have collected so many billions in 1 year. Where is that coming from? It's coming from business people. Okay? Now, I give you a substandard material. I give you a substandard service, but you are prepared to collect some money for me and let it go. He says it's not, don't worry, it's a little. That little becomes a larger portion of the pool.
And we are collaborating with the International Trade Center in Geneva to run this program, providing women with the market information, intelligence, and pricing rules to enable them get into export, as well as advocacy in terms of quality. We also embarking on a very aggressive export marketing business by taking Nigerian exporters to international fora, trade fairs, seminars, and meet buyers group to allow them interact with their foreign counterpart, because export business is all about competitiveness. If you cannot compete, then you cannot survive. And that is where they see each other, make business contacts, run some deals, and conclude them. And what is the effect of that? It makes you develop according to the market and follow the trend. For these international trade fairs and exhibitions that we are doing, we pay for 50% of your flight tickets. And who is an exporter? Exporter for us must be registered with Nigerian Export Promotion Council. And the registration is as seamless as this. We do not register individuals as exporters. We only register exporters based on 3 different category groups: a limited liability company, a cooperative society, or a non-governmental organization.
Then you look at the standard of living. If I come here, the people that I'm paying 18,000, what do I expect from them? Nothing. In terms of productivity, because they won't get to work until 10 o'clock. 3 o'clock, they are ready to leave. And the 18,000 that I give to them is not even enough for their transportation. So how do you expect me as an investor to come here and produce? And if I don't produce, how do I get my money? So those are the things that I think. But for me, to wrap it up, I think we need very strong business-friendly policies. And we need to make sure our institutions are stronger.
Now, imports and exports have great influence on we consumers and our national economies. In our interconnected global world, consumers are used to seeing manufactured products and agricultural produce from every part of the world in large shopping malls and also in their local stores in the various corners. These commodities, also known as imports, offer more and alternative choices to consumers and help them to manage their household budget. So if you go to your market, you see Nigerian rice, Thai rice, Indian rice. They offer you options. However, too many imports in relation to exports can distort a nation's balance of trade and also alter the value of its currency. And the value of a currency, in turn, is one of the biggest determinants of a nation's economic performance.
The very first one is what I called the Dutch disease syndrome. Dutch disease syndrome. The Dutch disease syndrome is a disease, contagious disease for that matter, which is not natural, but rather it's artificial. How is it artificial? What we call Dutch disease syndrome, I believe the student of economics will definitely go along with me. And those who study political economy too, we understand what I'm saying better. Usually comes up when you crowded out the traditional tradable sectors in your country by the new booming sectors. When you allow it to crowd it out, when you allow the new booming sector to crowd out, to displace the traditional sector, then you will definitely suffer Dutch disease syndrome. And the consequence of it is always very catastrophic on economy. Today, we find it difficult to talk about these traditional sectors of our economy. I'm talking about the agricultural product. Between 1973 and 1979, even when Nigerian experienced oil boom, our exchange rate was relatively stable due to the fact that the agricultural product contributed and accounted for more than 70% of Nigerians' GDP, gross domestic product. Unfortunately, the moment we realize that these oil booms will continue to be in our society forever, we fail to realize that it was just for a period of time. We didn't make use of the windfall. Later on, we replaced the agricultural production with oil windfall, and we came up with structural adjustment program. With all this, structural adjustment program was implemented within the context of stringent conditionality, which eventually bring this Dutch disease syndrome into our economy, and that send it all. Number two, I'm talking about the political and economic effect of oil. This particular factor is closely related to the first one that we mentioned. Dutch disease syndrome, political and economic effect of oil. Today, nobody is saying anything about agricultural products. Nobody is looking at the non-export products, non-export sectors. We are now concentrating more on oil. With this mono economy, anytime any destabilizing factor happen to the oil price at the international market, we are going to pay for it with our oath, with our nose. And that's exactly what is happening to our economy.
Using the consumption approach, the value of a nation's output is the sum of what? Final demand output bought by we consumers, business people in terms of investment, governments also buy, and we send some outside export. They also import some. All these four components are important in the context of the economy, but let me, for the moment, dwell on the last one, net exports. If exports exceed imports, This net export figure will be positive, indicating that the nation has generated a surplus from engaging in international trade. If exports are less than imports, it will be negative, and the nation has what? International trade deficit. A positive net exports contribute to economic growth and the nation's income. More exports imply what? More output from factories, industrial facilities at home, as well as the greater number of people who are being employed to keep these factories operating. The receipt of export proceeds also represents inflow of funds into the country, which fuels consumer spending and contributes to economic growth. In a way, then export is offers to another market outside of your geographical jurisdiction. On the other hand, imports are considered to be what? A drain on the economy. They represent an outflow of resources from a country because they are payments made by local companies to importers overseas. So if you keep on importing from China, it means what? You are promoting China employment because the goods are being produced there.
And so today we've come to try to see the kinds of things that we can do, especially at a time like this. How can we rev up our exports so that we can stabilize the Naira? As I said, the Central Bank of Nigeria is already doing a fantastic job, in my opinion. I know we still have some issues with harmonizing the exchange rates, the main exchange rates that we have. But we'll be able to talk about some of the reasons why we still have the multiple exchange rate regime that we have today. We will talk about these kinds of things. The central bank has come basically to the rescue of the economy by providing various programs, including the Anchor Borrowers program for farmers and for people operating in agriculture. They've also provided large amounts of money, huge amounts of money in the micro, small, and medium enterprises development fund that has been set up. And so we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We have to be able to grow our economy to somewhere near 10% if we are going to be globally competitive. And so, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the cry that you hear from our villages and our communities, and sometimes the sycophantic begging for handouts that we see about us, is how the people show their pain from the wounds of economic violence and poor competitiveness.